Star Wars: The Acolyte has something important to say about the role of the Jedi in governing the galaxy, and it applies to your life.
Jedi say I can't exist.
Leading up to the show's release, actors and showrunners teased a critique of the Jedi Order before their period of decline that we call the prequels. They hinted at a show that was going to be challenging the Jedi's view of balance of the Force. As we know of the Jedi, they, like George Lucas, view balance as the absence of darkness, or the Sith. This doesn't line up with how most of us in the audience probably think of balance. We've been trained to think about balance as the yin and yang concept, or cooperation and coexistence between light and dark, in a way that serves both. One cannot exist without the other, etc., etc. If the show has a political viewpoint, and this is a political and theological viewpoint that you'll hear in the real world, it's this.
His mind is twisted by darkness.
I've accepted my darkness. What have you done with yours?
Acceptance. You have some quirky wants, or needs, tendencies, or preferences, and you should accept them. Some will call it an inner darkness, and others will call it the authentic self. In the context of Star Wars, this is very literal. The dark side is captured by your passions: fear, anger, hate, desire, and control. The lust for power, which in turn can give you anything that you want. The Sith's singular aim is the breaking of chains that bind you, and the chains can be anything from your position in life to social expectations or relationships and family bonds.
So I killed Matsu. When the moment came, I didn't hesitate.
Anything that is keeping you from fulfilling your desires, which the dark side always takes as valid, are the chains that you must break. That's why the Knights of Ren have a membership requirement of killing a family member or an opponent done without any hesitation.
What do you want?
Freedom.
Freedom is a funny way to put what Qimir wants. He wants to be free to not just use his power in the Force, but to victimize others with it.
The freedom to wield my power the way I like.
He's not hiding the ball here. Like every other Sith and Darksider we've seen on screen in Star Wars, these are vicious people who want to be free from responsibility to others and be free to feed their appetite. To Qimir, the Jedi are the bad guys because they're cops, narcs, killjoys, prudes. Why won't they just let Darksiders like him run free to recruit and train apprentices to learn their ways?
I want a pupil, an acolyte.
Obviously, they should not be free to do this. Darksiders sound and behave the way that they dress, which is like moody goth teenagers.
You thunder against me!
Everything is the fault of others. They are the victim of your oppression, despite the fact that they are the ones who are always choking out unarmed civilians every chance they get. This take on morality and government in Star Wars is like when a parent attempts to discipline or guide their out-of-control child, and the kid's best line of defense is to say that the parent isn't perfect either, and they're a hypocrite.
I should have known the Jedi were plotting to take over. Anakin, Chancellor Palpatine is evil!
Will the adult acquiesce or draw a line in the sand on what kinds of behaviors and ways of living are tolerable? The problem with Sith and Darkside acolytes is that their doctrine of hunger will always push the next boundary. It requires it. Nothing is ever enough when you're punch drunk on the dark side. If you give these people an inch, they will take a mile. This is why most governments try not to cooperate with terrorists. It sends the wrong message and incentivizes more terrorism, which brings us back to acceptance. Star Wars fans and commentators have long debated the moral high ground of the Jedi Order and how they sought to control the Force and disallow the Sith from existing in the open.
I don't make the rules. The Jedi do.
There's an obvious political undertone here for the real world, which Leslie Headland, a gay woman and activist, wants us to think about. I'm not criticizing Headland's lifestyle, but we should question where this line of thinking takes us.
To a dark place, this line of thought will carry us. Great care we must take.
based on the way that the Qimirs of the world think about acceptance and inclusion. Really evil people really want you to accept them. Can Middle-earth tolerate the awakening of Sauron? Can the aggressive nationalism of the Fire Nation and Earth Nation be contained when their stated goal is dominating their neighbors? You're basically forced to make a judgment here. If orcs and goblins have told you in word and deed that their goals are antisocial, total war, and the dissolving of society itself, can you let them exist? The Jedi decided no, they cannot. And that decision was correct. In my own book, here it is, How the Force Can Fix the World, I wrote a chapter in here on balance, that Star Wars wants us to balance the light and dark and incorporate both into our lives. I believed it when I wrote it, but I don't really anymore. That's the theory of shadow work, a sort of Jungian psychology concept that we all have an inner darkness, and darkness is to be treated as subjective. It may be sexual, pathological, or violent, and you're supposed to incorporate that darkness into your life in a healthy way, so that it doesn't come spilling out uncontrolled and unknown to you. This was the main theme of Showtime's serial killer drama Dexter, where serial killer Dexter Morgan knows at an early age that he's wired to crave murder, and so he is steered by his father toward taking that out on bad guys. He calls this lust for blood his dark passenger, and he feeds it steadily. This was on my mind during the writing of the book, after the Atlanta massacre at an Asian day spa, where the killer seemed to be motivated not by anti-Asian hatred, but by sexual fetish involving Asian women, for which he felt a deep amount of shame for religious reasons. You hear this a lot with narratives around compartmentalization or closeted homosexuality. If someone is viciously homophobic, it makes you wonder what they're hiding, and we've all seen this. The Acolyte is operating in this territory of thought. A man we know as Qimir is deep down the rabbit hole of darkness and evil. He's a vicious killer, and he doesn't even consider the humanity of his victims after killing them. In the case of Jecki, an 18-year-old Padawan, he refers to her as an it after striking her down.
Was that its name?
But don't worry, he's accepted his darkness. This is the big lie of acceptance. If you approach acceptance of yourself with zero moral codes or objective ideas about what is right and wrong, you end up in a black hole of relativism where none of your actions matter and the lives of others don't either. Systems of right and wrong and belief in the existence of good and evil is the only way to properly go about this thing called acceptance.
Good is a point of view, anyway.
If nothing is good and nothing is bad, then what do you need to accept it for? There is no concept of acceptance without things being desirable or undesirable. In Star Wars, there is an upside to doing this. Now, Qui-Gon Jinn is the one who figures it out. He cracks the code on eternal life by transcending his hubris and accepting his dark passenger. And it's the key to becoming a Force ghost. Integration of the whole you, the good and the bad, treating it all as valid and authentically you. Yoda learns this in his journey to become a Force ghost and unlock that power when he meets the Guardians of the Wills and he faces off with a dark Yoda version of himself. Yoda does not treat this darkness as an alien force, but something that is just as much a part of him as his goodness, his patience, his love for others. He also harbors things like fear and hatred. Recognizing this about yourself is transcendent for a Jedi.
Part of me you are. Yes, but power over me you have not.
So there are two truths. We all harbor an inner darkness and capacity for evil. In the words of Alexander Solzhenitsyn, Russian, who was a survivor of Soviet communist prison camps, the line between good and evil runs not through states, nor through classes, nor through political parties either, but right through the human heart. This very passage by Solzhenitsyn was even mentioned as the theme of this Star Wars poster by artist Daniel Clark. The second truth is that evil exists. It's not subjective to say so. Good is a real thing. You know it, you can feel it, and you see it in the world around you. If you get convinced that evil is just an arbitrary standard that someone made up to control or oppress you, the Jedi, for example, your parents, the church, you are well positioned to become an acolyte.